Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies at Charles Darwin University, and welcome to Outrider 39. The obstacle is the way. Yes, this is the conclusion of our Use the Difficulty trilogy, and we've borrowed the phrase from a truly mediocre book from Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle is the Way. Ryan Holiday is basically a sub Malcolm Gladwell. Really basic ideas expressed in a really basic way. Just what the culture needs right now. But it comes from Stoicism. Now, Stoicism is a branch of philosophy that activates the importance of logic, rationality, parking one's emotions, and making a logical and rational determination or judgment. So Stoicism, the Stoic. If you think about Mr. Spock, is Stoic. But the goal of Stoicism is to manage bias and perhaps to aspire to universal reason. Stoicism is significant because it explores the very nature of ethics and the nature of who we are as humans, what is moral well-being. And this perspective was described as classic pantheism by the legendary Dutch philosopher Spinoza. Okay, so I will address the critique of Stoicism before we enter our discussion today. Obviously, all of us as individuals, we exist in a power structure. We exist in a class structure, so we can be as stoic as we like and logical and rational and think that we can control our destiny, but obviously we live in an unjust system, and so that every decision we make comes from the font, from that environment of injustice. It's very easy to be an autonomous individual. It's very easy to make good choices if you've got plenty of money, you've got a family, you've got a stable job, you've got some free time, you've got some leisure. Real easy to be sort of rational and logical when you've got a bit of space to breathe. Okay, now the problem is most of us in our daily life have to rely on the goodwill and the benevolence of other people to sort of survive in work, in life, in families. But where the Stoics are important, I think, is they are a reminder of the value of logic, the value of rationalism, and the value of every now and again, in fact, to be frank, most of the time, parking one's emotions and looking at evidence, being rational. So we gather information, we make an interpretation or a judgment, and we move forward in our lives. That seems a pretty straightforward thing to do. But as you've heard me say so often, bad stuff happens to really good people, both in a PhD program and outside of the PhD program. But the question is, okay, bad stuff's happened, right? Bad stuff's happened to me, bad stuff's happened to you. Okay, now what are you going to do about it? How do you feel about it? See, the issue is not that bad stuff happens, but the issue is your response to it, your next steps after something bad happens to you. So today we are going to focus on a very complicated space in our lives. Okay, an obstacle appears in your life. You've had a paper rejected. You've been knocked back from a job. You've got sick. A spouse or a partner dies. Bad stuff's happened. Okay, what next? What next? And that's where the obstacle is the way. But I also need to log one more caveat, and that's particularly for all our wonderful colleagues out there in a PhD, and the PhD itself has become the obstacle, right? So they go, oh, if I can just finish through this PhD. Okay, so the obstacle is the PhD. Now, I need to say to you really honestly, a PhD is not a compulsory part of life. Only 1% of the world's population have a PhD. Most of the world's population will never even have an opportunity to enrol in a PhD. So if you're complaining about your PhD, and as a student recently said to me, I've worked 5 months on this PhD without a day off. can I say the student was enrolled for an incredibly long time, so the question is what they were doing with the rest of that time, but okay, so they were enrolled for 5 months and they hadn't had a day off. Well, if that's a problem for you, because that's life, that's late capitalism, but if this is the complaint, if the PhD is your problem, then the obvious, rational, logical answer to that is stop doing the PhD. Withdraw from the program. No one has a gun to your head and says, you must do a PhD. So if you're one of those people who's complaining that your supervisor is not doing enough, and look, they may not be doing enough, but let me summon the Stoics and tell you a difficult truth right now that really no one is talking about. Let me tell you what's happened in the last 5 years after the restructure and the restructure and the restructure of our universities. We now have fewer paid staff who can work as your supervisor. The adjunct workplace, and therefore the adjunct supervisor, has increased in number. So there are a large group of people who are supervising you who are not being paid at all to supervise you. They're doing that work for free. And even for the colleagues who are paid academics, many universities around the world have no workload, no money for being a PhD supervisor. Now, you've heard me say so often, supervising students is a privilege. It is. But just recognise that the bulk of our supervisors now are not being paid at all. And dreadful people like me, deans of graduate studies, are now being very clear about the requirements of authorship. So supervisors are not getting an easy ride on the publications of their students. So they're no longer getting sort of the freebie publications anymore. So supervisors, a lot of supervisors, are giving you time for free, away from their family and away from doing their research, which may get them a better job. So when you're complaining about your supervisors, just use a bit of the stoicism and say, right, well, that's why perhaps the supervisor is not there when I click my fingers. So this is reality. This is the contemporary reality of higher education. And the other final caveat I'll tell you about a PhD is just because you're enrolled, just because you've put in the time, just because you've sacrificed, just because you're smart, just because you have knowledge, does not mean that you have a right to complete a PhD. A PhD is about scope and scale and standard. Just because you put in the time you clock in and clock out doesn't mean you're going to be able to get a PhD. So therefore, if the PhD is too difficult for you, then please stop doing the PhD. So if the PhD is the obstacle in your life and your success, then simply make a decision to stop it. Now, that's where we start to get into the interesting phrase, the obstacle is the way. If the PhD is an obstacle that's important to you, how do we move through it to gain success? The argument from Ryan Holiday comes from Marcus Aurelius, who was a Stoic philosopher, Roman emperor from 161 to 180 AD. He's also, can I say, Marcus Aurelius is also a favoured scholar of right-wing commentators in the United Kingdom, the United States and Australia. So that's very important to remember. You'll hear Aurelius quoted quite a great deal on Sky News in Australia. So remember that. So Marcus Aurelius is famous for many things, but he's got a really great statement, which is, quote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Now, I love this. This is a bit of a rocky moment for me. What stands in the way becomes the way, right? Bring it, just bring it, bring it. That sort of phrase really gets me going. But besides summoning my sort of delusions, that phrase does summon some very serious life questions for us. How do we make ourselves? Why this question matters so much is, in our universities particularly, is our universities are destroying themselves at the moment. restructure after restructure after restructure, high unemployment rate of academics, high underemployment rates of academics, brittle, frequently absolutely incompetent leadership in our universities, and of course seriously weird choices in educational technology. So millions of dollars, euros and pounds are being spent on educational technology that is obsolescent when it's bought, and when it's introduced to a university is completely pointless. So the focus is on restructures, rebrandings, new buildings rather than scholars, knowledge and learning. So if you're looking for excuses to stop learning, to stop doing research, then international higher education will provide you with plenty of those excuses. Bad stuff is happening. And this context tends to create reactivity rather than proactivity. So we become reactive. So something happens and we respond rather than getting ahead of the game and being proactive in our own lives. But to rewrite the Stoics for our current age. Poor researchers are destroyed by crises. Good researchers survive crises. Excellent researchers use the crises. So who are you? Who are you? The gift of an obstacle is that it loans us discipline. It loans us a methodology and an epistemology. It demands that we transcend ourselves. It demands that we look for solutions beyond our personal and professional experience. A data set of one doesn't mean anything. An obstacle reminds us that a data set of one means nothing. An obstacle demands that we look at a problem with expertise, with data analysis, and with evidence. And then we cultivate self-discipline to learn to manage that problem in a new way beyond our personal experience. So Holiday argues that there is actually a process through which we can activate change in our life. He has 3 stages: our perceptions, our actions, and our will. Perception, action, will. Perception describes subjectivity, our opinion of what is going on at the moment. So when we confront an obstacle, we have to transcend our subjectivity. We've got to get beyond our singular worldview. We've got to see the problem from multiple perspectives. And we've got to transform an obstacle into an opportunity to learn. This is really hard to do, by the way, but something bad happens and you immediately reorganise your thinking to go, right, I've got something to learn here. What can I learn? How can I learn it? And we assemble information, a data set, beyond our opinions. We sit in our present and we learn to control what we can control. An event, colleagues, is just an event. How we place a story around that event, how we move through that event, that is on us. That is our choice. Remember that the great Tory politician and Prime Minister, and when I mean great, it's not as in great as in fantastic, but she used the Stoics a great deal. And that Prime Minister, of course, was Margaret Thatcher. And Margaret Thatcher had a slogan, Tina, there is no alternative. Tina, there is no alternative. Now, she used Tina, there is no alternative, to damage millions of people's lives, damage entire regions of the United Kingdom, and destroy particular industries. And of course, Tina is a lie. It's a lie. There are always alternatives. Always. We can't change an obstacle, but we can change our approach towards that obstacle. We have to recognise that we actually have control over our perceptions, our opinions, and our subjectivities. If we choose to complain, but something bad happens, if we choose to complain, then that is the choice we have made to respond to that obstacle. Now, other choices are available. We can focus on the present, we can treat an obstacle as a learning experience, and we can make a series of decisions that move us forward. Therefore, obstacles are a gift because they heighten our thinking and they demand more of us. They demand that we learn new literacies. Therefore, changing our perceptions prepares us for action. We have a directed action towards a goal, a logical, rational, proactive movement through a problem. So think about it in your own life. What do you do when something bad happens, when you confront an obstacle? Do you watch Netflix? Do you drink your own body weight in Chardonnay? Do you go for a walk? Do you have a nana nap? What do you do? Now, how are any of these actions addressing the obstacle? Certainly, it feels better to temporarily ignore or avoid a situation. So something terrible happens and people drink themselves through it with a single malt, right? That's okay. You don't feel anything for a while, but the obstacle is still there. There is no way around. There's no Prince Charming, there's no lotto win that's going to rescue you. You have to rescue yourself. Therefore, the actions that you undertake in response to an obstacle are crucial. You make a decision. I am going to start. I am going to say, yes, I'm going to start moving. And the gift of movement, the gift of momentum is when you start, it actually rewards you. If you're waiting for life or conditions or universities to improve, hell will freeze over before that happens. Therefore, the obstacle teaches us that failure is a gift. It is a life diagnostic. What went wrong? What happened? What did I not do? What skills do I lack? We also learn to live in the present rather than be drawn back to the nostalgic past or a future that will never happen. There's something really important, empowering about living actively in a saturatingly real present. So this means our actions can respond to an obstacle and they can direct us, they can organise us, they can make us engage with our reality. So the final stage of Holiday's model after perception and action is will. This is self-discipline. This is your personal engine that continues to propel you through life when all the people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, your boss, tell you that you're rubbish, tell you that you're not good enough, tell you to go away, tell you you're pathetic, you're stupid, you're nothing, you're nobody. When all the people around you tell you that, it is your will that allows you to stand up once more and prove that they are wrong. Will has a lot of other terms in our present: resilience, humility, flexibility. It also has a lot of characteristics. It's the capacity to acknowledge pain but not be stopped by it, the capacity to be alone and revel in the aloneness, the capacity to accept failure, acknowledge failure, understand failure, and still move towards success, the capacity to recognise that life is a struggle. It's not nice or benevolent or comfortable. It's hard. And the capacity, this is the hard one, the capacity to get up every morning and continue to work and work hard and work with quality, not because people are watching you work or because people are validating, oh, aren't you doing well, giving you feedback, continuing to strive and get up every morning and work just because the work itself is important, not what other people tell you about that work. Now, I'm aware the entire culture works against what I've just said there. You know, Oprah and memes and affirmations and so forth really work against what I've said there because I've configured life like the Stoics. This is real. There is no happy ending. This is not a fairy tale. This is late capitalism, and it's tough. This system is organised to exploit you, to hurt you. So what are you going to do about it? We can also see in our universities today the consequences of so many academics, and particularly academic leaders, taking shortcuts through their career, riding on their students' work, not actually being able to do the research, not actually being able to teach, but living a professional life of delusion, living a professional life of pretense. They may be on tenure with a big salary, they might have a posh title, but can you imagine the stress of living every day knowing that you are a pretender, that the pseudo-narrative that you've constructed on the website is not actually real, is not actually true, that someday somebody is going to go through your publications and show the publications where you were listed as an author and you did nothing, or you're going to be found out for sexual assault or sexual harassment or bullying. Think about how it would feel to actually know that you've underperformed throughout your entire professional career. You've lived a lie. And yes, you've been promoted on that lie. But someday, that castle is going to crumble. Integrity takes a lifetime to build, and it can be lost in a second. Imagine the stress of knowing that you're not good enough, knowing you've stolen the research, you've stolen the success of others. You've been a freeloading postdoc on articles through your entire life. Yeah, you've got the H index, but now through Google Scholar, people are able to go through every single one of those publications that's built that H index, and they can see how little work you've done. Because you see, these scholars have built an academic life without obstacles, under-regulated, few policies, no monitoring of authorship. And of course, what happens when you haven't confronted failure or obstacles is you have an unhealthy perception of your importance, how significant, how fabulous you are. And people start to think that they're terribly important, better than other people, arrogant, self-centered, ambitious. You see, success is more than confidence. Success is more than recognition. It is the personal knowledge that you have the grit, that no matter what happens to you, you have the perceptions, the action, and the will to overcome anything that life throws in your way. Now, our universities, tragically, are punctuated by superficial metrics, short-term micro successes, rather than achievements over a career. Esteem, ethics, respect, decency take a lifetime to develop. these long-term accomplishments of academic life, or indeed a scholarly life, cannot be measured through impact or engagement or citations. Superficial metrics, however, allow these exploiters, allow these pretenders to gather high-quality ideas from others to increase their lustre, the high colour of their career. Now, I know for students, this is absolutely devastating. Students do not have the background or the literacy to be able to read this type of deception, understand and locate these pretenders. I understand that. We see the H-index, which is revealed through the Google return. There's the H-index. And students rarely have the ability to go into that H-index and see what's going on underneath. Just to give you an example. So a citation that an academic gains on an article with 26 authors, or should I say the recent article in Nature with 5,000 authors, a citation you gain on that article is equal to the citation that you gain from a single authored scholarly monograph of 80,000 words. Those two citations within an H-index are equal. Now, we know they are not. That's the lie. That's the lie of our research culture. And it is perpetuated by academics who benefit from that lie. But this perception is now starting to be unravelled through research integrity, research misconduct discussions, really deep conversations and investigations about the nature of authorship. Ask yourself, and this is a hard question, ask yourself, are you a pretender in waiting? Can you do the work to complete the PhD, or are you reliant on other people? Will you be able to write a book? Will you be able to start and finish a research project in a timely fashion? Yes or no? Are you a pretender? Can you do it? Do you hide behind words like collaboration and partnership? Are you using words like collaboration and partnership to mask and exploit other people? Now, obviously, there are deep and terribly important collaborations and partnerships. We all know that. That's the nature of being a good citizen. But the trouble is these words have been colonised by the exploiters, the freeloading postdocs who are invariably not postdocs but are professors. And also those leaders that should be nowhere near a leadership position. And this is because our higher education sector around the world has invested in superficial metrics, the short term, and promoted the exploiters. If the obstacle is the way, then the clock is ticking on these pretenders. The PhD supervisory culture of this student will work for me and finish my publications until I decide that they can't. So the wizard model of supervision, you will work for me until I tell you you're finished. That model now is starting to wind down, and I'll tell you why. The doctoral space around the world is now increasingly regulated. It's got governance, it's got policies, it's got procedures. The length of time in which a student is enrolled is now being monitored and assessed with absolute clarity and precision. We have research integrity policies that are watching and caring for students and disempowered academics, and we've got deep scrutiny over authorship protocols right now. So therefore, I wanted to finish off this Use the Difficulty trilogy with a few comments about failure and failure studies, because you rarely hear about failure in academic life because these pseudo-academic narratives, these fairy tales talk about these big successes and the failures are cut away. There are so many lies circulating in our culture about families, about work, about life, about money, about the past, and about the future. The best of failure studies intervenes in these lies, cuts up the social media narrative of happy families and holidays in the sun, and gets real, gets gritty about the lies that all of us have been living, and the lies that we try and pass as socialisation to teach the next generation of academics. Particularly the notion, I think, that extraordinary, hard-working, brilliant people are successful. Failure is important. Failure matters because failure provides us with knowledge. It gives us knowledge about our own freedoms, our own emancipation. Failure, I know, makes us feel vulnerable. And I'll tell you why it makes us feel vulnerable. Because it makes us aware of power structures. When we fail, all of a sudden with horror, we realise we're in the midst of this power structure and we don't have any power within it. That's why failure hurts, right? That means when we fail, we have to confront the difficult truth that we don't have control over our own lives. The binary opposition, though, of success and failure, it lies to us. As individuals, we tend to bury individual failure in shame or blame or secrecy. And we grant all the attention, the money, the fame onto individual success. But of course, success and failure are not about individuals. They're about power structures. They're about the lies that we tell ourselves. Now, this way of thinking about success and failure may seem okay, you sort of get it, and it might be all right in the abstract, but it really helps when we're in the middle of a failure and we have to deal with the cascading emotions of that failure. But we always must remember, even in the middle of it, that failure is not an event. It's not a situation. Failure is a diagnostic of the power relationships in our lives. Too often, I think we all consider failure as an outcome or as a result, of something we really cared about, we were desperate to achieve, and it's all gone wrong, we didn't get the expected outcome, and we feel a bit rubbish. But it does change everything, I think, when we understand that failure is located in a system. And there are, as Mika has described, quote, neoliberal logics of success, end of quote. There are also, therefore, neoliberal logics of failure. Look at the people in power in your organisations. Have a good look at the people in power in your organisations. Then have a good look at the narrative of success they tell on their webpage. Have a good look at that. And then you know what? Go have a look at the data sets behind that. Go to Google Scholar. Do some Google searches about teaching and learning quality, about qualifications, about what order they were in authorship on that article. Have a good look at their personal achievements. And you'll see that an astonishing gulf exists, particularly now, between the narratives being told about success in our universities and the actual data sets, the stuff those people have actually done on their own in tough times. Look at the gulf between the fairy tales that they tell about themselves and the data set on which those fairy tales are actually built. There is an epistemology of failure, just like there's an epistemology of success in neoliberalism. and we need to log, we need to interpret, we need to understand those logics. So it's time that we start to cut up this bizarre narrative that successful people have worked hard, they have progress, they have development, they have a career narrative, and people who fail are lazy, pathetic, and a bit stupid. We have to cut that narrative up because it's not true. Failure and failure studies gives us the space to stop and to block this ridiculous binary opposition of success and failure. Instead, the obstacle is the way. Just as there's no singular way to be successful, there is no singular way to fail. These narratives of success and failure, they lie to us. They're not separate, they're not separated. Success and failure are platted into our daily lives. And the only difference between them really is how we react, how we respond, and how we perceive that event. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.